Hello, and welcome back to all you juicy ear hustlers to another episode of The Corporate Chronicles, the company you keep. Okay, so before we get into this story, let's go ahead and take care of some of the formalities, shall we? Just a reminder that this podcast was designed for pure entertainment purposes and is a little overly dramatized and somewhat embellished to protect all innocent parties involved, if there are any. These stories may or may not derive from real events that could have occurred to either myself, family, or friends. These episodes could hit home for a lot of people, and we've all had to endure some type of dilemma, slander, awkward moments, and even unwanted advances from people you'd least expect within the corporate world. I say all this because I want you to keep in mind that these stories are being told because the corporate world can be the biggest beast of them all. Yet it hides behind this white collar, white glove image from 1,000-yard view, but I'm here to help you remove your rose-colored glasses and give you an upfront look of some salacious, crude, unsolicited, and thought-provoking scenarios. Once you've heard the story as I've told it, it's up to you to decide whether it's based on real events or simply fiction. And how would you handle the same situation if it happened to you? You will now become the narrator and complete the story as you see fit. So I implore you to sit back, relax, and listen to a tale of TNTs for your pure entertainment pleasure. Episode 2, What Came First, the Ruler or the Jester? Rumor has it that God comes to you at a whisper, with a warning. But for those of you that are a little hard of hearing, he tends to use a brick to get the same message across. Now, my brick stood at a slinky 6'3" know-it-all with an abundance of machismo, and yet still somehow couldn't figure out the difference between subjective and objective within speech. He was every subordinate's nightmare, yet he pranced around the office from desk to desk like a pinball on the loose, while lurking over his subjects as if he was born to reign over us all. Entering into a new job already has its challenges like learning your boss's managerial style, getting to know your peers, and identifying which ones are the corporate backstabbers, who's the boss's favorites, who's the town crier, i.e. gossip king or queen, and who are the black sheeps. The latter is usually the group I aligned with the best. So upon accepting this new position a month ago, I was assured that training is top priority due to the specialized nature of this position, along with the fact that the previous employed occupant had abandoned their post 5 months earlier. So needless to say, this job was pretty important to the company. However, for reasons unknown, the ruler, formerly known as my boss, decided that a day of me watching my coworker clumsily banging on his keyboard as he simultaneously produced rapid-fire clicks of his mouse flickering through various screens while consuming copious amount of coffee was just the right amount of preparation needed to get me set up for success. Whisper number 1. Coming to the realization that my work was literally cut out for me and my quote-unquote training would only consist of actual on-the-job execution, I trudged through the past due workload abandoned upon me with the thought of sweet karma playing a melodic tune in my head. For the next few months, I treated daylight as my fickle enemy that I only encountered during the weekends because my work hours were growing at a faster pace than chicken pox at a grade school. In the occasional event I would encounter an issue that required a manager's voice, I would forward inquiries to the ruler only for them to fall into a pit of no reply. Or when he did grace me with a response, it was to insist that I provide a multiple choice of solutions for him to choose. This wasn't let's make a deal, and I wasn't there for hosting his antics. I needed real assistance from a tenured leader and not an amateur from open mic night. And this soon became a running theme of his monarch because he would never confirm or deny anything in email to the point where I just started making executive decisions on my own. If this wasn't bad enough, he decides to take a 2-week hiatus during my first week on the job. And if it wasn't for the taunting reply from his out-of-office email, I would still be in the dark today. What did I get myself into? Whisper number 2. The heavens finally answered my prayers. Please note the sarcasm. Because the ruler finally decided that he could spare some time to provide me with our first one-on-one meeting. I'm assuming that is because he finally ran out of everything else on his to-do list. after an overdue 3 months. See, for those of you who aren't familiar with the 101, this is a meeting that typically happens weekly or bi-weekly between you and your manager. This allows you to discuss any roadblocks or request assistance from your boss and them to provide feedback to you as well. It's like a meeting of the minds, yet I have a sneaky suspicion that I'm the only one packing here. So with pen to pad, I started jotting down all the questions, concerns, issues I had encountered that I wanted to run past him just to ensure I'm on the right track. And this list kept growing at the speed of my thoughts. I was eager to get more information about our business partners, what department do I utilize for certain projects, as well as obtaining point of contacts for these divisions. I was ready. As I sat there waiting his arrival in the meeting room, I told myself to have an open mind, as there could be a lot of reasons as to why he's not available or reliable as a boss. He could have major projects that he's struggling with and is spreading himself way too thin, but I'm just not aware of them. As I'm entering into the next train of thought, he walks into the room with no remorse, but mumbled an excuse about another meeting as he takes a seat right across from me. Looking up at him, I realized that I hadn't really seen his face. Truly looked at his face since my interview. What a view. I saw the look of a moronic haze being portrayed by his thin, weathered face, deception gleaming through his beady, petite eyes, and a strong sense of arrogance by the way he holds the corners of his mouth. In that split second, I could tell that this man lived and breathed by the power of this job. Before I could even begin discussing my list, he starts to make idle chit-chat about how do I like working with my coworkers, to which I promptly responded, "It's going well." Then he proceeds to go down the list of each member of my team and asks if I had the pleasure of chatting with them individually, to really get to know them. My head immediately pivoted towards him in a jerking motion because I had to see if he was serious about this question. Here I am, being buried alive for the past few months, engulfed by delinquent work, but you need to know if I'm having separate slumber parties with these newly introduced strangers? Well, that's the version I heard in my head. I was completely astonished, but managed to muster up that I've been a bit bogged down with work, and that's why I've been anxious to meet with him. He interrupts to tell me that I need to become friends with all 15 members of the department as we want a cohesive work environment, and he will ask around to verify if I've done so. I was speechless, literally at a loss for words for the first time in a very long time. Whisper number 3. We eventually got the meeting on track, and I was able to tackle some of the items on my list. Now, before you get excited, I only got to voice my issues. There were no resolutions. See, the ruler was no better in person than he was in emails, so I soon realized that this meeting was simply an exercise in futility. With only a couple minutes left in the meeting, I figured I'd ask a question he should know. What department should I go to for the new project he had just assigned? He provided the department name and contact person for me to speak with. And as I wrote down this information, I inquisitively said, "I'm not familiar with this person." He immediately responds, "Oh, trust me, he'll know you." I darted my eyes up from my notepad and asked him what he meant by that, to which he replied, "You'll soon find out." I then encouraged him to let me in on a secret as I didn't understand his train of thought and needed clarity. I thought to myself, am I moving to another department and I'm just becoming aware of this transition? Though at this point, that wasn't a bad idea. With the look of a cat who swallowed a 10-pound canary, he said, "Trust me, everyone knows who you are around here." Then proceeds to stand up, locked eyes with me as he walked past and exit the room. Boy, what a drama queen. Whisper number 4. With alarm bells ringing loudly in my head and red flags appearing whenever I was in my boss's presence, I was determined to prove that I was more than qualified to do this job, even with limited supervision, and do it better than the ruler could ever anticipate. The more he avoided me, the more involved I became in networking within and out of my department. I was able to obtain useful information, advertise my skill set, expand my communication reach, as well as establish a name for myself. I was becoming the go-to girl in no time. I was proud of myself. I didn't allow the ruler to dictate my performance output, even though he had full control of the duties I was to perform. And he enjoyed this. I too enjoyed correcting his vernacular within meetings and during common conversations to establish my tit-for-tat capabilities as well. Now, This is not my usual warfare to participate in juvenile antics, but this man was out to diminish me, and I wasn't going to let him dim my light. I still, however, garnished him with the respect of being my manager, but drew the line when it came to him disrespecting me. Much time had passed, and it was drawing near to the company's year-end review. I was well prepared because throughout the year, I kept track of my work log that contained my delegated projects, any ad hoc assignments acquired, and all teamwork assistance that I had provided. I just needed to present them in a manner that would highlight my persistent efforts, accentuate my initiatives, and spotlight my teamwork collaborations. How could he not give me a raise? As the days grew closer towards my big review, I find myself smiling at the ruler whenever our eyes engaged each other, heartily greeting him with morning salutations, and I even forced out a pity chuckle when he attempted to make a joke out of a coworker's expense. Oh wow, maybe he is the perfect candidate for the open mic night. For over a week, I ensured that I was portraying a well-behaved subordinate, almost like putting a very thick band-aid on a picked wound. It couldn't make the situation any worse by killing him with kindness. Besides, his egotistical nature wouldn't dare show my sudden turn of cheek anything more than admiration towards him. Okay, today is the big day. I felt like I was about to receive a Presidential Medal of Honor just for working in an environment where chaos called it its home, let alone the stress I endured under the ruler's regime. As my coworker departed from his corner office, she walked over to my desk as to initiate a game of tag, thus signifying my turn within the bull pit. Gathering my thoughts and things, I walked over to his office and took a deep inhale before entering into his office. And once my eyes gazed upon his, released my breath in a slow sigh. Upon sitting down, I noticed his face did something that I hadn't seen before. Well, not when the intentions were in my favor. It was a smile. He took me back a minute, but I did reciprocate the gesture, but I'm sure my smile was sent with bewilderment. The meeting is kicked off with me listing out my projects and completed accomplishments, which he didn't offer much in response outside of nodding in agreement. Then I launched into some of the challenges I've had to overcome with no supervision, especially being the newbie, then wrapped it up in a bow with ways I've improved the efficiency of our department with my creative suggestions. Although that did ignite a raised eyebrow from His Majesty, but to my surprise, no interjection or rejections. Now, it was his turn to proceed with his review analysis of my past several mental performances, and I braced myself for his snarky comments. He leans in towards my direction with elbows pressed into his desk and an even bigger smile and said, "I'm amazed." Unaware of what was occurring, I remained silent as I felt more was to come that would put my mind at ease. He then continues to tell me that he didn't think I was made to last the past few months in this business and thought I was going to crumble after day one. Feeling a sense of relief, he starts to lean back in his chair and laughs at the situation. Maybe it was at me or maybe at him, but I was none the wiser. My head starts firing off shots of thoughts from every cylinder of my brain, trying to weave sense into what's coming from this man's pit of despair, aka gaping pie hole, aka garbage chute, aka, well, you get the point. He sat there feeling very proud of himself as if he was Jesus on the mountaintop preaching out to the disciples. He felt empowered. Continuing on his soapbox, he admits that he set me up with only a day's worth of training to view my reactions, that he notably didn't provide me with the supervision to see how I would handle things, and that he purposely sabotaged my growth within my tenure for his greater godlike reasoning. He was out of control with madness and drunk with stupidity. This man was willing to jeopardize the health of the company because of whatever vendetta he had against me. But wait, for what reason? In trying to remain calm, I stared daggers at him with crossed arms and closed fists, tilt my head to the side and ask, "What was this for?" "Ah, I'm glad you asked. Let me take you back to the day of your interview to where we invited you to our panel session. You see, your responses to all the questions were borderline perfect. You presented yourself with overconfidence to perform the task as it laid out to you, and even won the trust of my colleagues with your personality. However, I didn't want to hire you. I placed my vote into another candidate's ballot that didn't exactly align with the consensus of my team. You might have been the perfect candidate to handle the job as they saw fit, but I knew she would be less of a threat to work with. I wanted someone I could mold, and since I couldn't mold you, I had to break your spirit first in order to rebuild into what I wanted. But as you've proven to me time and time again, you wouldn't break. I tried my best to make you quit or at least come crawling to me in defeat, but you just never did. I'm truly amazed. Oh, and the fact that you had the audacity to demand the amount of pay you felt you were worth, and you hadn't even proven yourself yet. So I had to make you prove your worth to me. As he completed his reign of terror speech, I interjected with one more lingering question. Then why did you hire me? He said, see, that's the craziest part of this whole thing. I didn't want you, but knew you would truly be the best person for this job. However, when suggesting that I would go with the other candidate, the director who was in attendance of the interview was so impressed by your talents that he offered to hire you for his department instead. Well, I couldn't have that because you would get a much better exposure over there, and I didn't want to become the water cooler talk about how I let someone of your talent get away. Okay, there you have it. Everything's out in the open now, and I probably shouldn't have done what I did to you, but I had to make sure you were qualified, and you are. Can we just forget about all of this and move past it? We really do have a big year ahead of us and going to need your help. Then he proceeds to stand up, reach his hand out across the table, and positioned it right in front of me. Brick! So, with the story being told as I've just laid it out to you, that just leaves me with one question for you. What would you do if you were in my stilettos? Until next time,